And we are live. We are live.
Good.
How are you, folks? Andre Chumley here. We are back with confronting creativity. You know, it's been a little while since we've been on, but with the August, a little bit of a break and doing some other things. It's just good to be back. Um, Let me get set up here. I'm my own producer, folks. So, but good to see you. My name's Andre Chumley. We're here on the Make Weird Music channel, the YouTube channel. Whether you're watching live here on Friday, September 17th, or sometime in the future, and it's a show where we talk about creativity and we talk to different creators and artists and big thinkers around the planet. So tonight, I'm really delighted. This is a gentleman that I was very fortunate to meet many years ago. I was touring with Don Preston, and we did a thing up at Cornell, and I met this gentleman. He is a composer, a synthesist. He's a keyboardist, a sound designer. He's actually somebody that the House Un-American Activities Committee looked at. He's
My
in the
proudest
60s.
moment. Yes.
Proudest moment. He's a record producer. He's an economics and investment expert. You know, the word is polymath. This man has done so many things. He's not an architect, but he's designed a couple of homes, including the one he's in today,
Yeah.
that have been featured in Architectural Digest and different magazines. We could go on. This is a man of many talents, but I'm going to shut up and say, welcome to the show, Patrick Gleeson. How are you?
Good, Andre. Good to be here with you. And thanks for building me up the impossible so everything will be a letdown. Anyway.
Well, no, well, let's start with, wow, man, you know, this has not been a normal time. Give us a little snapshot of how you're doing and how this 18 months or so has been for you.
Well, it's, one thing that's been very strange about it is that to back up just a little bit, I spent 5 years developing a kind of a new approach to some synthesis of jazz, electronic music, and EDM. All three kind of mingled together. And then was ready to go out and explain this to the world but through performance. And then we know what happened. I mean, I was going to perform my first gig was going to be March 18th. Which was like the first bad week of the pandemic, and of course the gig was killed. It was going to be Electronic Music Festival in Burbank, so that went away. Then the same guy came back to me, and he said, this was early this spring. The thing is dying down now. I think we can do it again. Well, we know what happened to that. So now this has been postponed until the end of October of 2022, of all things. So unfortunately, my wife has a non-entertainment business gig, so we're not out on the street.
That's great.
Yeah, in a sense, great. But I mean, it's just a horrible time for musicians. And of course, we know how much the world cares about artists because now that everybody else is back to work, they said, okay, fine, no more unemployment compensation because you don't need it anymore. Well, I know guys that are just, in fact, I was talking to a friend of mine, I won't say his name, just this morning, and he explained to me that he's just drained the last of his retirement savings. So not a good time in general. Our family has been lucky.
Wow. No, giving thanks, to having a little bit of savings, and certainly unemployment, got me through. But it's true. Working in the music biz, as you know, I do as a tech, as a booking agent, as a tour manager.
You should be out on the road with somebody famous now.
It's right. I should. I canceled 2 tours this year, 5 last year. So I hear you, man. That gratitude is. I'm glad you noted that because a lot of people are not fortunate to be even indoors right now.
Yeah.
So okay, and of course, as somebody who's been used to working at home in your studio and alone, as we've talked about over this time, that part of it you know how to do already. So that
Yeah,
was
that part Charmaine was teasing me. She said, you didn't even notice.
it's yeah.
So,
There's that. Now, I most recently saw you 2 years ago, where we did the Moog Fest, and so
yeah,
people got to see some of this new music you've been doing. And we're going to talk a little bit about the arc of synthesis that you've been involved in. And for folks who don't know, the word is overused a lot. My dear friend Mark Doty always says that we overuse the words legend and pioneer, and he's right. And I'm guilty of that myself sometimes. But Patrick, you used the first Buchla that was sitting
yeah,
in a room, correct?
yes, I did.
Wow.
I wasn't the first user, but it was the first Buchla.
Right, it was the first one that was there. So we're gonna jump around and talk about that, but I want to stick a pin in what you're doing right now, though. And at that Moog Fest, I met your producer Kamran V, and
Yeah.
I know you were working on some new stuff. Tell the audience a little bit about your work with Kamran and about this great package coming up, this Forever package.
Yeah. First of all, I got to say I'm very lucky that I ran into Cameron because we really hit it off, and he's an amazing guy. He's so damn bright, and so actually the software we're doing a record in vinyl, which is a quadraphonic record, and the software that we're using, and also one of the outlets for it both are things that he's invented. So he's figured out a way that you can take a vinyl turntable, stereo turntable, plug in a new needle, and connect it to a quadraphonic environment, and it will play a quadraphonic record. I mean, it's just pretty amazing, because what he figured out was that the normal excursions in a record are this way. That's what makes the sound. Nobody's decoding this. So Cameron said, okay, we got two more vectors that we can introduce simply by making an electronic record of the vertical excursions of the needle as well as the horizontal excursions. So hence quad. But anyways, it's been really fun working with the guy. I told him I really love working with people that are smarter than I am. It's kind of like, hopping a jet. You just get places that you would have gotten possibly, but you just get there a lot sooner. So, and the sooner is we've finished the album. It's going to be released on September 28th, at least the Spotify and all that stuff will be released on September 28th. Whether we will be able to actually release the album itself on the 28th depends upon the pressing plants. The pressing plants are backed up like crazy. You heard that, I suppose.
So I've heard, yeah.
Yeah. So they're telling us maybe. So anyway, it may come out a month later. But in any case, it's going to be coming out this fall. And I don't even know what the price is. It's not my business. I don't care. I mean, the whole object was to break even.
Sure.
We're only doing 86 copies.
Okay.
It's a limited edition of 86 copies.
And
it's got a whole bunch of other stuff with it. So it's got about 2 hours of music from the beginning of my career up to Moog Fest, and a short book, sort of an apology for my life, if you will, and sort of directed toward the music. So it's a kind of a musical biography, and that's the package. I don't know what it's going to cost, but it's a limited edition, so they're probably going to charge. I'm thinking maybe a couple hundred. It's not up to me. I don't care.
Sure. Well, we will be looking out for that in just about 2 weeks or so, and
Yeah.
we'll definitely announce it here on Make Weird Music when it's available. Why 86? Is there?
That's my age.
Oh, okay. Which I have to say, you've taken great care of yourself, Patrick. I don't think
No, just
anyone.
lucky. I didn't take great care of myself.
I don't think anyone is prepared to believe that you're 86, which is so keep doing the right stuff.
Okay.
That's great. Now we have a couple tracks from this, right? Is PSK? Is that one from?
That's from the forthcoming album.
Let's just hear just a couple minutes of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. And that's a 9-minute track, is it? That one?
Uh-huh.
So wow. So just a taster there, folks. But so that's going to be in forever, and so much to ask about with this. But tell us a little bit about this new world you've been in the last several years, which is Ableton and software and all these soft synths, because you're making it sound like wait, what is this? Are these modulars? Are these samples? Tell us a little bit about your
my method is haul in the garbage and sort it. Some stuff I'm actually doing with virtual modular synths. Okay, but other stuff I'm doing sample stuff. I'm actually using more and more. This last year, I've used sounds that I've just recorded on the street. I've gotten some really interesting percussion sounds that way. And if I have to, I'll actually play a keyboard. But my method is very what do I want to say? Results oriented. I'm not quote a synthesist in the sense of a purist. that's great for young people, and I hope they enjoy what they're doing. I found that it was like terrifying. I mean, if you just harken back to 1971, and there I am with Bill Evans and Miles Davis in the audience, and playing with Herbie Hancock without a rehearsal for the very first time with with an instrument that plays one note at a time, is not touch sensitive, and has no patch memory. So that means you got to plug in as you go. I had thought when I was getting ready to go out on this gig, I'd done the record with Herbie, which was itself kind of a surprise that it happened.
Sure.
And then I thought, well, that was fun, and you know, now back to doing commercials and PBS specials and stuff. And then I got a call from Herbie. He said, you know, can you come out on the road with me? Because you're all over this album, and I want you to tour it. So there I was. I'm on my way out on the road with, you know, 6 of the most astonishing jazz musicians on the planet, with this kind of a deficit, you know. I mean, I actually did have a jazz background, which nobody knew about. But other than that, completely unprepared, had never played with a live band before of any kind. As I say, you know, a really deficient kind of an instrument. So when people are interested in modular synths, I say, okay, great, you know, enjoy. I've had enough. I want to leave the table now. Thank you. That's sufficient. So that's my attitude about it.
That's great. And a couple shots there for people, some classic shots of you performing with modulars, performing with Herbie. That other shot looks like you're looking at a laptop. It's probably like a music stand. But
oh yeah. I think it was when I was doing I think it was the Planets, when I was recording the Planets.
This one here.
That one right there. And that's my email.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing shots. Well, you know what's interesting? You said that you are in your new workflow. You're sampling real world sounds, making percussion. Of course, musique concrète, which I know you started,
man.
Yeah,
that's where I started.
Yeah, I know you've done a lot of that. Take us back to that, because I want to talk a little bit about a few early memories. And I'm going to call it LSD meets Bartok, because
there we go.
You took LSD, but then you tell us about that period of using all the tape decks and doing musique concrète, because this is late '60s. No one was doing that in the live setting.
You know, the late '60s in San Francisco was a wonderful time for art, not just for musicians, but for art generally. And at a certain point, I'm in my little A-frame one-room house up in Mount Tam, and at the top of Corte Madera, for those people who know Marin County. And I'm sitting and I'm listening to Bartok, the first violin concerto. And I had dropped a half a tab of acid. I was taking acid pretty regularly a couple of years. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what are you doing, Patrick? This isn't what you love, the teaching school. That's not it. That's okay. So, you know, it's a fortunate way to make a living in a sense. It's better than being on the street, but it isn't making music. And that's the only thing you've ever wanted to do. And why aren't you doing it? So with that, the very next day I went to the AV room in San Francisco State. It was then San Francisco State College. And I checked out a bunch of Wollensack tape recorders from a very suspicious AV guy. You know, why do you need more than one?
Right.
Yeah. So with that, I began. I would take the M trolley from the school to downtown, and I would record everything that I heard. And then I would go home and splice that together and make it into music. And then if I found a vacant classroom, I would just walk into the classroom and set up, start playing. And it was the 60s, people would come in. And then pretty soon I started doing the same thing at, I never played the Pillmore, but I played Winterland and the Straight Theater. At the Straight Theater, I kind of horned my way into a showing. It was actually avant-garde film, so it was all silent. So what the hell? So I just set up all my tape recorders on the floor, and I would plug in and out to start and stop stuff, and that became the music. So that's where I started. And some young dancers heard me, and they were with Ann Halpern, leading contemporary dance entrepreneur and teacher. And they said, we would like to have you do some music for us, and we'll perform it at the Ann Halpern studio. So I found myself doing that, and then in this little room over to the side was this strange machine. I don't know, what was that? A keyboard? It must be a keyboard instrument. It was the first Buchla box, the very, very first Buchla. So there were about 6 or 7 guys that were the guys that were handling the machine and composing with it. Ramon Sendar and a bunch of people who later became famous. And I thought that's really interesting. So 2 weeks after that, the machine disappeared. I wanted to know where it went. Oh, it's over at Mills College. They've set up an electronic music center. So bam, I was on my way. And I bribed the guy that was the head of the studio. I said, I'd like to spend all night in here one night a week. He said, well, we need a tape machine. We need a 4-track recorder. We're short about $1,000 if you could swing that. So I gave him $1,000, and I became the proud possessor of one night a week at the Mills College Tape Center. So that's where I started making electronic music.
That's great. Mills College. And of course, as you say, wow, what an amazing and important place, Mills College and the San Francisco Tape Center. And you mentioned Mort Subotnick, Ramon Sender, of course, Paulina Oliveros, Suzanne Ciani. These were all people you were hanging out with. I think
Suzanne was a little bit, she's younger than I am.
A little later.
So, okay. For her. So, she wasn't there at the beginning, but she certainly became a very important advocate for the Buchla.
Yeah.
And she's a wonderful musician too.
She really is. She really is. And what's really wonderful is it's funny because, just to share with people kind of your current setup, we've been looking at some older pictures, but here's a very spry Patrick. This is kind of a recent.
Spry. That's what they say when somebody's really old. They say, he's pretty spry.
He's quite spry. He's
quite spry for his age.
But there he is, I love it because, you're doing stuff with Ableton that is pretty wild, I think. But what's also wonderful is as we speak right now in Berlin, there's one of these trade shows called Super Booth, and just to kind of show people how the circles go round and round, while Patrick's not doing any hardware stuff, the Buchla company is around today. Here it is. This is their brand new 2021. They're just releasing this week. So it just really to tie together the history there of how durable this man's inventions were. But there was Patrick using the first one. It's great. Tell me a little bit too about, and of course you were doing, as you say, music concrete. You even had your motorcycle on stage, right?
Yes, I did.
Tell us about that performance, because that was like a dozen tape recorders and motorcycles.
I think I had at least that many, and I had one. It was a very small studio. I think we quote sold out, but I think that was maybe about 50 people. Okay. And I had a tape recorder under like every third seat. And then I had a malt box on stage, and I would sit in the lotus position on stage, being a pretentious jerk, and and would plug different things in and out to create the composition. So it was sort of semi-improvised. And then at the end, I thought, you know, for the grand finale, what I'll do is all the lights will go out, and then I'll wheel my motorcycle on stage, and then turn the headlight on and have it hit the audience and gun the engine in time to the musique concrète. So that was the grand finale. And then the dancers are dancing. But you know, the 60s were a lot of fun. That was the big thing about it. It was very easy to do things in the 60s compared to now. I mean, I feel like the whole country has gotten sort of sclerotic, you know? I mean, it's like, I went back, many years after I'd first played the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco. And I mean, it was harder to get a gig after being a professional musician for, 30, 40 years and having done a few things. It was harder to get a gig then than when I first went down and saw the director of the museum. I just explained to this man that I was going to put on a happening. I mean, he'd never heard of me. Nobody had ever heard of me. I was, a great nobody. And he said, well, when did you want to do this? I said, well, as soon as possible. He said, well, we couldn't do anything for a couple of months. And there was the happening. And I think we had about 400 people. That was the way the 60s were as compared to now.
Sure. No, I know you've done a bit of, and we've talked about this. Yeah, it's just a different environment now. And fortunately, there's these arts theaters and these smaller places. And in fact, you have played a couple times in the past couple of years, besides the Moog Fest, which is wonderfully captured, right? There's a CD of that.
Yeah.
Is that CD available, the Moog
I've
Fest?
withdrawn it. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
It was a limited edition to begin with. It was only 100 copies. And I think I sold 51 of them. And then at that point, I realized that I was going to take the same music and be developing it for forever, the new album. I thought, well, I'm doing this music again because I think I can do it in a more interesting way. So why am I selling this other record? So I've taken it off the market. It's basically the same tunes. The orchestration in the new album is more percussive, and probably the orchestration is more varied. So I like it better.
Okay. Yeah.
I think for soft synth music, probably the live performance at Moog Fest is more what some people would want, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, there are some bits of video of the Moog Fest 2019. So, folks, if you get a chance to check that out, it was great performance.
Oh, it's on YouTube. That's right. Yeah.
It's on YouTube. Oh, great. And full disclosure, I was working for Pat on that, so I'm a little biased, but I thought it went fantastically.
Oh, yeah.
It was great. Here's a recent show that you did. Tell us a little bit about this. This was in New York City, right?
This is in Seattle.
This was the Seattle show. Tell us a little bit about
no,
this.
I'm sorry. No, I don't know. We played a couple different places. That was New York.
Okay.
And Michael Shreve played in Seattle, and Lenny played in New York. Lenny White played in New York. We had the same guy on sax.
Okay. Who's that on sax?
The 86-year-old brain has no idea. In about 30 seconds, I will.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about
Sam Morrison.
Sam Morrison. Great.
Yeah.
And wow, what an interesting trio. Computers, a drummer, and saxophone, multi-player. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about how that was and what structure that was.
This is a very interesting thing to me, and I'm deviating a little bit from the question you've asked, but what I have found in the past 3 or 4 years as I've begun bringing this music forward is that really, in general, most jazz clubs are not interested in my playing because, it's not jazz.
Yeah.
The thing that I think because of that, by the way, I have shifted probably farther away from jazz than I have in the past and more toward EDM because, my God, the audience is 100 times larger and they want me. And the jazz guys don't, which is strange to me because I very clearly hear how it's jazz. It's improvised music. But there's a jazz police that have been dogging me, man, since I first played with Herbie. You know what Downbeat's review of my first performance with Herbie Hancock was? They didn't say a word about me until the last paragraph. They were very uncharacteristically not enthusiastic about the album in general. But when they came to me in the last paragraph, they said, without giving me a name, and about that synthesizer playing. The less said, the better. And then this kind of thing has been happening to me. I won't embarrass the man that I'm talking about, but so there was a guy that knew me, Michael Shreve, and all followed Miles and all that stuff. So we assumed that he would be happy to have us at his jazz festival. And he was just delighted until I actually sent him the music. He said, I didn't hear from him, which surprised me. So I phoned him and I said, so, what did you think? I just want to tell you, I think that, you've had a remarkable career and you've made a very valuable I said, so you didn't like it? No. I said, so are you going to program it? No, it's not for us. So that kind of thing has made me realize, and that happened, that's not the only time that's happened. I could embarrass, well, they probably wouldn't be embarrassed, they might be proud. But in any case, I could tell you several entrepreneurs that have turned down that opportunity in the field of jazz. Yeah.
No, this is an interesting problem, and I've talked to other artists who are outside of the boxes about this. And fortunately, the Moog Fest we're hoping is a, and I know there's some other synthesizer festivals and conventions and stuff that you're in touch with. So hopefully that's where your world is going to be, going forward as we get back to live stuff.
Yeah.
But they don't know what they're missing. Jumping around your catalog a little bit, because we could spend hours just on the stuff you've released, and this whoever this entrepreneur was who didn't bring you in, of course, as you said, you did that beautiful record on Holt's Planets, and you did the music of Star Wars. You've done so many different soundtracks, and of course the Apocalypse Now music. Well, one of my favorites is one that's kind of hard to find, Rainbow Delta. So I'm gonna
that was an early one, yeah.
That was early, 1980, right? About that?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna play just the beginning of that, because what's so cool, I think, is there's a straight line from this to some of your other music, but yet it's from this 40-year-old sound.
And it's all modular.
So wow, just about a minute and a half of that. A record that I just think when I talk to other fans of yours, it's one that slips through the cracks. To me, that's 1980, and there's stuff in it that no one was doing for a couple more years. To that, some of those patches, some of those sounds. So that was all modular.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow, 100%.
Yeah.
It, the drums, all the stuff sounds like it's 10 years later, and kind of.
Thank you.
You know, I hope people rediscover that. So which mods are you using on that? Is that your Emu? Is that your?
That was the Emu, yeah.
Moog? Okay. So you've kind of had all the major modulars. You've had Buchla, Moog, and Emu in your life, and
yeah, and I also had a 2500.
wow. Yes, of course. Right. Some pictures. Take us through a little bit of again, doing another jump cut. Around 1968, you founded an amazing and historic studio, Different Fur Recording in San Francisco in the Mission District. There was a couple of the seminal Herbie Hancock albums done there, Cronus Quartet, Stevie Wonder, Jefferson Airplane. The first DEVO album, which you engineered and did a lot of the producing on.
Yeah.
The list is endless. People can go look it up. But reflect a little bit on that incredible studio, because that was, it just changed the game. Tell us about Different Fur.
By the way, I want to say, first of all, it's still there and thriving. I don't own it anymore.
Yeah.
But I was back there about 4 or 5 years ago. And when I walked in, the vibe was exactly the way it had been.
Wow.
And not only that, but the man who did such a great job for about 10 years with the studio has now got his own label and is busy being a label entrepreneur. So he's turned the management over to 2 of the engineers that were there. Well, I met one of them when I was first there, and I thought, God, she just fits into Different Fur perfectly. It's just like all the engineers we had. We had a lot of women engineers and a lot of gay women.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. In
San
fact,
Francisco, way ahead, right?
Yeah. And the woman who's head of George Lucas's studio did a lot of engineering there. Yeah. But the reason that I started a studio was because when instruments would play one note at a time, which was the case with synthesizers, you kind of had to have a studio setup to be able to present music, because you had to record it.
Right.
So it was kind of an accident that it ever happened. And because of that, nobody was very interested in money. You know, I mean, my career was taking off. I didn't need to make money from the studio. I just wanted the studio to prosper spiritually and not go broke. And something about that studio, it was this little one-room studio in the Mission District. And my God, we must have recorded 300 or 400 artists that the average guy on the street could name. It was amazing. And it's one of the only studios left now in San Francisco. There are a few. Wally Heider's is still hanging on, but Russian Hill is gone, and Automat is gone. So many studios are gone.
Yeah.
It's been a really tough time for studios, but some way or other, Different Fur has prospered. And I'm really proud of that. I mean, I'm glad for the people that have taken over the studio and carried it forward.
Sure. That's wonderful. And it's this beautiful area of town. I love that. I work a lot at the chapel right around the corner, that concert hall. So I go walking for a great burrito and to take a photo in front of Different Fur.
That's great.
It's the Mission District. This is a shot. Is this when under construction? Is this?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We were just building the studio.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great shot. And here's another great shot. This is just an article in Sound on Sound, folks, that you can read. But great article, great picture here. Wow, what a session this was.
Oh, yeah.
This was My Life in the Bush of Ghosts with David Byrne, Brian Eno. Tell us a bit
love
about
those
that.
guys, their attitude toward the making of the music was so original in a way and made so much sense. I'm thinking about Stop Making Sense, David Byrne's album. But and I used to go in there. I wasn't involved in the production at all. I wasn't even engineering that. My chief engineer was engineering it. That's the tape op there. But I would come in there in the mornings. They would come to work early. They'd be in the studio by 9 or 10 o'clock at the latest. And I would sit on the racer, which is the traditional couch that's in front of every console and sort of between the console and the glass. I would sit down there and just listen to these guys because I first of all, I was fascinated by it. Second, I felt, gee, I'm really learning something about production I didn't know, and I mean, most people don't know or understand. Their way of working was so interesting. I mean, I'll just give you one or two examples. For instance, there was no final mix. Every day they made a mix as if they were completing the project. And then they put that aside. And then when the whole project was almost over, the only thing left was they played everything they'd recorded and mixed and decided what they would actually use then. Very sensible, because we know how many guys have we been around that hit the sweet spot in their recording and kept right on going past the sweet spot.
Right.
Yeah. I have so many friends who've done I've done it myself. So it was a wonderfully rational way of doing things that most people didn't think about doing. Yeah, they were fun. We had a lot of fun musicians, and we had also a few guys that were just awful. I won't mention them by name, but people who were cranky, that thought the studio was a good place to take a lot of drugs.
Sure.
And so forth and so on. But we had a lot of wonderful musicians and artists in the studio. Really lucky that way.
It's an amazing roster, and I urge people to go check it out. Jefferson Airplane, some of the tracks there, and there's a Grace Slick album that you play on. Did that track happen in your studio?
Well, that was at Headhunters. We played that. That was the very first time I'd ever been in a recording studio.
Oh, the Grace Slick session?
Sunfighters, yeah.
For Sunfighter, wow.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Yeah, the whole thing was, I have to tell you a funny story.
Please.
So I'm in the studio with my modular Moog, and they're in, the airplane are in Studio A, control room, looking through the glass and watching me do what I'm doing. And the doorway from the hall, the load-in doors open up, and these two little guys walk in. And they come in there so interested. What is he doing? Huh? What are you doing now? Oh, right on, man. Then the guy reaches in his pocket and pulls out a vial. Then he reaches in the other pocket and pulls out a switchblade. I'm thinking, my God, what's this about? The guy opens up the vial, digs in with the point of the switchblade, and shoves it under my nose. I'd never seen coke before. He said, just sniff. Wow. So I sniffed and unfortunately started a year of cocaine use. Thanks very much, David Crosby.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
First session, first bit of blow. Okay, yeah. That's blows against the empire, or blow against the empire.
They should have called it blow. Just blow.
Yeah.
Blow.
Well, what the list of things in that record, in that studio. One more album I wanted you to reflect on, and then we'll jump to some other fun things. The the DEVO record, because to put it in perspective, folks, again, it's very overused, but Patrick is certainly one of those people that deserves this moniker of pioneer. Playing that first Buchla Modular, playing one of the first Moog modulars, bringing that sound into the Herbie Hancock world, touring with him, doing a few such important records, the Crossings record, the Sextant record, lots of live stuff. These little signposts, the Apocalypse Now soundtrack, and then what he's doing today with Ableton Live, which is, I think, the cutting edge sound creation suite
Thank
for
you.
musicians.
I appreciate that.
It really, not blowing smoke. I mean, he's doing things with it, because I think you're bringing decades of knowledge and sound creation to this new tool. But one of the stopping points in your synth history is working on that first DEVO album, because that influenced a complete generation. The sounds, the Moog bass that was on there. Tell us a little bit about your involvement on that engineering and sound.
How I came to have anything to do with DEVO was from my really good friend Bruce Conner, the artist. And Bruce fell in love with punk. And he was down at Marblehead Gardens, which was the punk nightclub on Broadway in San Francisco, every night, photographing and so forth. I don't know if Bruce ever brought out a book of photographs before he died of all that stuff. It would be fascinating to see. Anyway, he called me up. We talked all the time. He called me up one time and he said, I think these kids they need a producer. And Warner Brothers is interested in them, and it'd be a good time to get involved. So I said, okay, fine. So I go down and I pick up the band. They're staying in a tatty little motel across the street from the nightclub. Bring them into the studio, and we begin to work. The other thing I will say about them at that time is these kids they're teenagers, and they're bratty. I mean, they didn't think that I did anything in particular, and they especially didn't think Brian Eno did anything in particular. And what they did with me was not really all that cool, but they're kids. So what they do is they say to me, we want you to be our producer, and Warner Brothers has offered us $75,000. We think we should get $125,000 as an advance. So I go and talk to my record company, Mercury, and of course they say, oh, well, we could do 75. No, that's not going to do it. So with that, they hop off of my train and hop onto the Warner's train, and Warner says, we want David Bowie to produce you. Well, David was busy, so Brian did it. He was in Berlin at the time. So then they're going to leave. We've recorded 2 tunes on the album. They said, we'd really like a copy of that. We'll run you off. I said, well, could we have a reel-to-reel copy? So we give them a reel-to-reel copy. I don't hear a word from them. I don't get paid a cent because, I started to produce them and now I'm not. And then I see that I'm credited on the first DEVO album as the engineer. They've taken the 2 tunes that I produced and have gifted themselves the tracks. So anyway, my lawyer and their management company had a discussion. We came to a semi-satisfactory agreement. They told me they wouldn't give me credit because they'd already printed the album. So, okay, fine. I'm the engineer.
So, but people know, and you've spoken about this in other interviews, that there's the 2 songs that you fully produced and fully, And I think they changed it on a reissue or something. They may have made note on a reissue of
oh, really?
I think so. I
Good
need
for
to
them.
check that. It is noted somewhere in the world, but here we are, telling people what really happened. Wow. Well, I always I sometimes forget we've got some questions here from people. We've got a lot of folks watching and listening. Thank you, folks, for being here. And if you're watching in the future also. We've got people from Minnesota and New Jersey and Norway. Wow, okay. Ottawa. Someone has, Sean says, been a fan of Patrick since hearing his synth work on Apocalypse Now. Yes, that's where a lot of us first heard him, or Herbie. Someone is asking, Guitar Journey is asking, do you have any? This is a tough question. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any tips on being an artist? Should you play for the crowd, or should you be completely true to the art?
You know, I'm going to give you a weird answer. You should do both. And I think what you have to do is find some way. Well, let me back up a little bit and start off with an analogy that I've used before. I think an artist's life is like water flowing downstream. You don't decide where you're going to go. The stream bed decides. The artistic environment you find yourself in decides what you're going to do. If I were 22 years old, I would have been making EDM like crazy, because not only can you have a lot of fun doing it, but you can make hundreds of thousands of dollars. There was a time when, you know, a reasonable composer could make $18,500 a week on doing television. Well, is television music the most inspiring music you could make? No, it's not, but it gives you time to make the other music that you really want to make. And one thing that I found out from a couple of decades of doing television is that it will make you into a composer. I mean, when I started out, I had never written anything approaching a cue for a television show. I didn't know that I could do that. Well, how will you find out? You find out by doing it. If they don't fire you, I guess it works. So that's my view. I'm trying to be actually helpful here. My view is that, you know, you find yourself in an environment, you have to find a way forward that will work economically, because unless you're an heir, you got to do something to make money. But you can do that in a way that will enhance your life and enhance your music. In fact, I'm a much better composer now than I was before I started writing for television. Now, did I write anything memorable for television? No, not really. But I learned a lot about my craft. And I made enough money to take care of my problems in life. So there we go.
That's some great advice. Split it down the middle, Guitar Journey. Address the audience, but also, you know, play for the art, play for the music. Someone's here from Netherlands. All right, fantastic. Lithuania. So we got some international people.
Yeah.
And Sharon has a shout out to Michael Shreve. That's right. And Michael Shreve is indeed a friend of the show. I've interviewed him, and he's just another groundbreaking, you know, multifaceted person. One of the wonderful things, and folks, if you don't know those early, it's about, I think it's the 10th album actually is the first one. So early, quote unquote, in a career that's ongoing still for Herbie Hancock, but it was about his 10th album, and what a radical different change the Crossings record was. If you don't know that record, folks, please go check that out.
I love that record.
Amazing. And Sextant, of course, and then there's a lot of live things on the web. And then Patrick went on to record some of Herbie's stuff. But what's wonderful is everyone is still with us. Of course, Herbie and Julian Priester, Benny Maupin, yourself, Billy Hart, everyone's here, Eddie Henderson. Yeah. And you've worked with some of these folks. Tell us a little bit about, and two things I want you to talk about. The availability of some of your music, because I know people can go to patrickgleesonmusic.com, right? Yeah. And then they can hear tracks and hear new things, hear stuff from Moog Fest.
Yeah. Well, there's a little record company that's re-released everything I've ever composed and recorded. So if you go to take any album title and just put in on the web, put in Patrick Gleeson and the name of the album, and then buy. And you'll find that record company. I think it's
Fantastic.
called, I think it's BSX Records, Sound Effects Records.
Okay, because
It's just a
that's
very small label, but they've reissued everything and you've done a nice job of it. I'm really happy about that.
that's fantastic. Is that because on your site there's a music page, but it's got more current stuff, right? Like kind of new tracks.
Yeah, I think so. And when
Yeah.
it's not as current as it should be, I should get, you're reminding me I should get to work and update that.
well,
Yeah.
well, we definitely have some folks on Make Weird Music and around the world who like to buy the download. Some of them all the way up to vinyl. Some of them really want to
Yeah.
get the vinyl. And so if you do, folks, yeah, as Patrick says, just punch in one of the album names. I'm seeing here. Okay, yeah, Cargo Records has the Star Wars one, and you get some other ones. Okay, great. There's also some other ones on Spotify, and I know things like I know you're one of those artists who says, yeah, that's one of the pathways. The recent, it's about 7 years old, but the great record that you did with your old colleague, your old friend Benny Maupin, Driving While Black.
Oh yeah, that's a
Wow,
beautiful record right
great
now.
record. Tell us a little bit about that, because that's another recent one I think people should check out. And
Benny,
says it all.
I loved all the guys in the band. In some ways, I think Benny, as a musician, along with Herbie, was the first among equals. And Benny's path toward and through the music is so completely intuitive. The way we made Driving While Black, I composed everything beforehand, and I was living in San Francisco. Benny was in Altadena, so we talked, and I said, let me send you the charts. He said, no, we're going to record up at your place, right? I said, yeah. I said, well, I'll wait till I get there. So he comes to my house. I have a little recording studio in my house. And he gets out his clarinet and he bought his other instruments, but he started there. And he said, well, ready? I said, well, I mean, I had the tape up on the 24 track, but I said, would you like to hear it first? No, let's just hit it. So the very first time he's hearing this music, he's recording over it. And we did probably 3 takes. I would say pretty consistently for each tune, we did 3 takes. And I would say probably 80% of the music that of Benny's that you hear is from that first take. And there are a few fill-ins from the second and then the third take, but maybe 15%, 10%, maybe one tune 20. I mean, how do you do that? You haven't heard it. Now you're playing over it. Well, you're a jazz musician. That's how you do it. I mean, I was so admiring of that. And then my method that I've kind of constructed, I'm sure I'm not alone because it's a rational way of doing it, but what I do after an artist plays on something that I've composed and arranged is I go back in and I continue the composition by taking my stuff out. I pull stuff out until I get as little left as will really make it work. Because when I first started composing, I would write and write and write and write and write and write. I know nothing is ever enough. Then you finally learn, no, the least you can do is your best. So I try to, not that my tracks are that sparse, they could be sparser. If I live in another few years, maybe they'll get sparser, but I think it's a good direction to go in.
No, that's great, and you've said that before, and when one thinks about your influences, which are vast: jazz, orchestral music, funk, blues, and people like as you've said, you love the music of Miles Davis, of course, but from the electronic side, Terry Riley, Steve Reich, Wendy Carlos, Philip Glass. But you always say, and it's great to hear you pull it back to that, you always say that American minimalism is kind of one of your threads. And so that's great to hear you give an example that you chop away until it's.
Yeah. I had an opportunity to perform with Steve early on in my career. We didn't get along personally. Steve was super competent and super confident, and I was just beginning my career and probably edgy. I don't know. I'll attribute it to being my problem, but we did a couple of performances, one at the Berkeley Theater and one of the galleries in downtown San Francisco. And then Terry Riley and I did did a film score together. Yeah, for one of Bruce Connor's, the piece about the atom bomb.
Okay.
Yeah, Crossroads.
The soundtracks are hard to find sometimes because, of course, Plague Dogs, and you've done a bunch of TV stuff. Plague Dogs is a great soundtrack, folks, for that movie, if you don't know that one. And, of course, Apocalypse Now. Give us a quick reflection on that because, of course, wow, working with Coppola on that 1979 classic, working with our dear friend Don Preston and a team of other people. But
yeah.
One of the iconic moments of that movie is when the helicopters come in, and you did that sound on a Moog modular. Tell us a bit about the sound and about any memories on that.
It's interesting. That particular cue, which I think is the best cue in the film, was Bernie Krause's and Shirley Walker's, now departed. And they didn't get along. It was a strange I don't know what to call it, conglomeration of people. And certain people didn't get along with other people. It was very political. At one point, Shirley Walker was so upset with Bernie Krause that she went to she should have gone through me, which was my point when the time came, but she went directly to the film manager and said, this guy is below par and I'm carrying him and it's a waste of time and money and I want him out of here. I mean, it was a bit harsh. And so he called me, the manager called me and he said, you understand we're going forward without Bernie. I said, wait a minute. I'm the head synthesist, master synthesist. That's what Coppola is crediting me with. I'm the head of the project. How did Bernie get fired without my knowing? Oh, well, I mean, we thought you wouldn't mind. I said, no, in fact, you rehire him or I'm out of here. And he laughed. Doug said, oh, yeah, I know you're not serious. I said, yes, I am serious. And I didn't like Bernie's synthesis myself. But the point was that you don't do that. You don't give somebody the authority and not give them the power to execute that authority.
Right.
So Bernie got hired again. And my wife said something which turned out to be very prescient. She said, so after complaining about Bernie all this time, she said, you've saved his job. He'll never forgive you for that. And man, he did not. I don't think Bernie and I ever said a word once that movie was over.
Wow.
And when we had the farewell dinner, his wife made a special point of denouncing me.
That's
you
great.
Think you're so hot and so special, and you're not. I don't think Byrne, he may now, but I until today, and probably not today, he probably never knew that I saved his job.
Wow. The dirt behind some
Oh,
of these sessions. But the Apocalypse Now, there's so many stories about, yes, the politics and the Coppola family in and out and other composers
and drugs. Don't forget drugs.
drugs and wine. And so that's a great little snapshot. But another wonderful place people can hear what you do. You know, Patrick, thank you again for your time. We're here with Patrick Gleeson, folks, and thank you, folks, for stopping by and some great comments and people. Oh yeah, The Residents. Someone brought up. Yep, that's another great San Francisco band. I want to circle back and make sure people know that coming up on September, is it 28th?
28th.
28th. This new project is called Forever, and we'll do a little promo minute on it when it's out here on Make Weird Music. But it's the producer Kamran V, who's another fascinating artist with all kinds of stuff, and obviously an inventor too, right? Would you say?
Oh, really? Amazing guy.
Obviously, you know. So look up Kamran V, folks. That's KAMRANV. Incredible artist. So that's coming up, and let's see. We can do a little taster of another track from that. What's another? I've got Lookout, Bank Float, The Work.
Sure.
Any of those? Oh, these are all on the box. Okay.
You know what you could also do is you could do the very first tune.
Okay, Quasar.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Charmaine McCleary or Charmaine.
Hold on. I'm sorry about this. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
Honey, I'm right in the middle of a Zoom call. I'll talk to you later. Okay, sorry.
Okay, sure. So let's hear just a short clip of Quasar. And let's get all the technical buttons pressed here. And here we go. So folks, this is from the upcoming Patrick Gleeson release, Forever. And it's going to be a comprehensive package. It's called Quasar. a little bit of Quasar, and tell us a little bit about that's the first one that was done.
That's the very first thing I ever played on with Herbie. So he came over to the studio. He brought one side of the record, and I was, of course, astonished that I even had the opportunity. And we went into the studio and we started playing the 24 track. Maybe it was a 16 track at that time. And so, we got in about 20 seconds and Herbie said, I'd like something maybe about right here. So, man, I just started patching like crazy as fast as I could, because I thought, from the perspective of a non-synthesist, this process is very slow. and Herbie's a jazz musician. He's going to get impatient with this. So I patched it as quickly as I could. And I said, okay, I'm ready. He said, did you record it? I said, well, I'm just setting the machine up for you. You seem to be doing fine. Well, just go ahead and record it. That process continued. After about a half hour, he said, I got some things to do today. I'll come back later. He didn't say when later was. So I by the time he got back, which was the next afternoon, I had been up all night and I had recorded one side of the album.
Wow.
And then when the whole thing was over, as I said, as we began our talk today, I thought, well, this is probably it. This has been a wonderful opportunity. I've never been around such amazing musicians in my life. What a privilege. Be content with that. And then the phone rang, and I spent the next year and a half on the road with Herbie. So it was wonderful. Yeah.
Which, other than Sun Ra a few years later, had to be one of the first touring jazz outfits with a synth. I mean, right? Was Weather Report on the road with synthesizers?
No, they were.
Yet?
Weather Report was on the
weren't.
road at exactly the same time. In fact, their album "I Sing the Body Electric" came out either a month before or after ours. Yeah.
So it was,
but interestingly, I mean, what Joe did, which was almost supernatural, but what Joe did was so different from what I did that I never felt, like out crowded. I felt like I was the only guy doing that at that time, just as Zawinul was the only guy doing what he was doing.
sure.
So really two very, very different approaches.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we mentioned Eno before, and I don't know if he came up with this word, but he uses this a lot. It's a cool word, scenius. Have you heard that word? Scenius. It's the word scene and genius. And he raises a good point, like talking about, say, French impressionistic painters or, African American novelists in 1955 to 65, or electronic musicians in the 60s or now. And the point is, it's tough to find the one person who did this or that, because a lot of you all were doing stuff around the same scene. Sometimes you could point to a moment like when there's only one synth, like a Buchla, but that's what the early 70s, late 60s feels like, right? You had you and Chick and Joe, George Duke,
and then Wendy.
And Wendy, right, in the more experimental side, right? You had, of course,
who was the best.
Yeah,
which he did. I've done a couple of classical versions. Synthesizer versions of classical music. Tamita has. I guess me and Tamita are two that most followed her. But in retrospect, there was only one that counts. Amazing. Wendy was the only one that counted.
Yeah. She
was a very interesting person. I got to know her very well. She was a very interesting person and idiosyncratic in every possible way. I mean, people know that she was a transsexual, and that was a big deal. That was the least of it. I mean, her whole life was kind of remarkable. And I think she brought to, switched On Bach and the albums that followed, there was a kind of a wittiness about her, that she, I mean, she to me, it was jokey.
Right.
Wendy was serious as a heart attack, but she was also very witty. And so the music had this kind of scintillating edge, and at the same time that was completely musical, it was full of surprises. And I thought that was a wonderful accomplishment.
Full of surprises. That's a great. Yeah, and so many great records, Beauty and the Beast, and all the things that followed, Tron, and all that. So
Yeah.
agreed. Just towering synth
Yeah.
influencer, pioneer, creative. Um, Last question then for today. I wanted to get your thoughts on, again, bringing us right to today. There's the Forever package coming out, folks. You can hear some of Patrick's current and recent music on patrickgleesonmusic.com. Wonderful stuff he's doing with Ableton, with software, with soft synths. Give us a little snapshot of how you got here, because of course we've just notated all these amazing modular synthesizers that you were working with early on. You knew all of the creators. You knew Don Buchla. You knew Bob Moog. You know Dave Smith. All these people, and of course,
Alan Perlman too. Yeah.
Alan Perlman. I mean, I don't have time to list them all. You clearly knew them all. Dave Smith, Roger Lynn. And then having a studio, of course. In fact, in that picture we just saw with Byrne, I saw a Prophet 5, it looked like over there. So you obviously had all these synths in your life, all through the studio time, all through the 80s. Tell us about that moment when you said it's going to be computers, because it had to be, years ago before Ableton. But when did you kind of know that was going to be the future for you?
Well, I didn't know, but I was very interested. And they came out with a new machine called a Synclavier. And the Synclavier was the first workstation, if you want to call it that. It wasn't a virtual workstation like all the ones now. It was a physical object. It was a $300,000 physical object. And because of that, not many musicians had the opportunity to use the machine, and it went out of business as inexpensive digital machines based on MIDI came out. It killed it. But when the Synclavier came out, I thought, well, I need to leave analog completely. And my reasoning was based on my experience with Herbie. Mm. And that was Herbie, my God, what an amazing musician. I never felt that, good as Herbie's synthesis was, I never felt it came close to what he could do with an electric piano or a regular piano. And why was that? Well, if you were Herbie Hancock, how much time would you spend screwing around with twisting oscillators and knobs when you can sit down and be absolutely uniquely masterful without having to bother? You've already done that work. It was very reasonable, but I think it, in a sense, meant that Herbie, for various reasons, because of his career being so successful and being on the road so much, he just never had the chance that I did, because nobody wanted to hear my music, and I had all the time in the world to tinker and find out how synthesizers worked. So when this digital instrument came along, I thought, okay, if I without being the musician Herbie is, I'm going to make the same mistake. I'm going to find it that I'm so good at analog synthesis that I'll never get into digital. So I sold every piece of analog gear I had.
Wow.
And went direct, and I didn't even know if it would work, but I knew that it would never work unless I tried. So and then I learned the Synclavier. And then of course MIDI came out, and I just moved forward from there. And as soon as MIDI came out, it was very clear that, wonderful as Synclavier was, it was a dead dodo. You could pay $300,000 to $800,000, or you could pay like, $500.
Right.
So what's the choice? So then I just moved forward whenever I could. My daughter said something to me one day. She was teasing me. She said, "Dad, you're so superficial. So whatever the latest thing is, that's what you're into, and that's good and bad. But that's the way I do it. So I've spent my life in music moving forward as fast as I could.
I love it. I love it. Keeping up with what's happening, and uh, so many stories there. Well, Patrick, this has been great. We'll love to have you back some other time. Maybe when it's time to go play live, because
Oh, that would be fun.
we know you have plans for that. We all do. All the musicians, all the people who play out, and it's happening slowly. It fits and starts, right? Some shows are
I think we're
getting
going backward, man.
postponed.
I think it's going to get worse. I do.
It's tough because I'm seeing just as many tours cancel as ones that make it. So it's obviously
Yeah.
like flipping a coin.
Yeah.
But people who are out there, I wish them the best and stay safe. I'm going to wrap and say thank you so much, folks, for checking this broadcast out of Confronting Creativity. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you've got one last question, then you can throw that out. If it's a really good one, I'll grab it. But I will say that next week, we're on again next week, Friday, September 24th, another polymath composer, a percussionist, a drummer. This is a man
Greg.
who is, Greg, yeah.
Oh, sure.
Greg Bendian, who is an educator also, and somebody who's worked in, all these genres, whether it's with Cecil Taylor or Pat Metheny or the Klein brothers, right? Alex Klein and Nels Klein. He's had his own band called the Mahavishnu Project, which is, I would say, the preeminent Mahavishnu tribute band ever, because all the guys in Mahavishnu heard this band and cheered it on. Jan Hammer sat in with them. So this is someone who's done a lot of forms of music and still is. And he's got some amazing new stuff he's doing right now, some production and some new music, some new percussion music he's doing. So we're going to talk to Greg in a week. So you
Tell him
weird,
hi.
yeah, I will tell Greg hi. And you weird music fans, this is a man that's done some very weird music. So we're going to talk about that. So that's next week. Please subscribe, please like, and keep listening to weird music. That's why we're here. Thank you so much, Pat. I'm going to hang up here from the stream. Pat, you stick around. Thank you, folks. Thanks for being here. Keep it weird. Okay, great. We're